My name's Tessa Rowan. I'm 36, and until last year, I honestly thought my husband and I were just trying to survive the way most middle-class couples do. Not per exactly. Just always careful. The kind of careful where you stand in Target holding a $20 candle and put it back because it feels irresponsible. The kind where you avoid looking at vacation photos online because it starts arguments later. The kind where your husband says things like, "We're not in a position for extras right now," so often that eventually you stop asking for anything at all. That was my marriage with Nolan. We'd been together 12 years. Married for 9. And for most of that time, I thought we were a team. I worked full-time as a dental office coordinator. Nolan worked in commercial insurance and constantly talked about financial pressure like he was carrying the entire world on his back. Looking back now, I think he liked being seen that way. The exhausted provider. The practical one. The responsible adult managing a wife who just didn't understand money. The thing is, I did understand money. I just trusted him more than I trusted myself. Nolan handled almost everything financial after we got married. Not because he forced me exactly. It just sort of happened over time. He'd say things like, "I'm better with numbers. You already have enough stress. I'll take care of it." And honestly, after long workdays, I let him. At first it felt comforting. Then years passed, and somewhere along the way I stopped knowing what things actually cost in our own life. I knew we had a mortgage, retirement accounts, car payments, normal adult stuff. But every time I asked about savings or budgets, Nolan always sounded stressed enough that I backed off. "We're okay, Tess. We just have to stay disciplined." Disciplined. That word followed me everywhere. It was the reason we skipped vacations. The reason we barely went out anymore. The reason I kept wearing sneakers with holes in the soles for 6 months, because buying new ones felt selfish. Meanwhile, Nolan still spent money on things he considered important. Golf outings for networking. A nicer laptop. Season tickets with clients. But somehow whenever I wanted something, it became a discussion. Not a fight exactly. Worse. A conversation designed to make me feel immature. I remember once mentioning maybe taking a weekend trip for our anniversary. Nothing expensive. Just somewhere drivable. He actually sighed before answering me. "Tessa, you know we're trying to get ahead right now." That phrase again. Get ahead. Like our life was always starting later. I apologized immediately. That's the embarrassing part. I apologized for asking my own husband to spend time with me. I didn't realize how small I'd become until after everything happened. And honestly, the affair wasn't even the first thing that broke me. It was the lying. The years of it. The casualness. The night I found out started because our air conditioner stopped working during a heat wave. That's it. No dramatic setup. No suspicious lipstick or hidden phone. It was July, humid as hell, and our upstairs bedroom felt like an oven. I came downstairs sweaty and irritated while Nolan sat on the couch watching ESPN. "The AC's blowing warm air again," I said. He muted the TV immediately, already annoyed. "We just had someone look at it. 3 years ago. We can't drop $8,000 on a new system right now." His tone wasn't cruel exactly. Just dismissive. Like I was another bill arriving at the wrong time. I stood there for a second. "Tessa, come on. You know things are tight." Tight. Always tight. I remember looking around our living room thinking how tired I was of hearing that word. Still, I let it go. That's what I usually did. 2 days later, Nolan forgot his laptop at home. Which never happened. Around noon he texted me asking if I could send him a spreadsheet before a meeting because he couldn't access it from his phone. I was on my lunch break, sitting at our kitchen counter in pajama shorts because I worked hybrid schedules twice a week. I opened the laptop, found the spreadsheet, and while attaching it to an email, another message popped up in the corner of the screen. "Thank you again for everything. Seriously. I don't know what I'd do without you." My stomach tightened immediately. Not because it sounded romantic. Because of the name attached to it. Leah. I'd never heard Nolan mention a Leah before. I almost ignored it. I should have ignored it. But something about the message felt too personal. Then another notification appeared underneath it. Apartment payment confirmation. At first, I genuinely thought maybe it was spam. Then I saw the amount. $3,200. I remember staring at the number thinking there had to be some explanation. Maybe a client reimbursement. Maybe work housing. Something. My hands were already shaking a little when I clicked the email. And that was it. That was the moment my marriage split into before and after. There were months of payments. Same apartment building. Same woman. Utilities too. Furniture deliveries. A parking pass. Nolan wasn't occasionally helping someone. He was fully supporting another life. For 3 years. 3. I actually checked the date twice because my brain refused to accept it at first. 3 years meant birthdays. Anniversaries. Christmases. 3 years meant all those nights he sat beside me on the couch talking about budgeting while paying another woman's rent. I opened more emails. I wish I hadn't. There were hotel reservations from weekends he claimed he had work conferences. Jewelry receipts. One message from her said, "The couch finally came, smiley face. You have way better taste than me." I don't know why that specific message hurt so much. Maybe because during that same month Nolan told me we should hold off replacing our mattress because we needed to be financially smart. I sat there staring at our kitchen floor for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Somebody outside was mowing their lawn. I remember random details like that because my brain couldn't process the bigger thing yet. Then the humiliation started settling in. Not just betrayal. Humiliation. I thought we were sacrificing together. But the sacrifices were mostly mine. I thought we were building slowly toward stability. Meanwhile, he was living a completely different reality behind my back. And suddenly years of conversations started replaying differently in my head. Every time he made me feel guilty for spending money. Every lecture about financial discipline. Every exhausted speech about pressure. It was manipulation, not responsibility. I opened our banking app after that. That part made me feel physically sick. There were transfers hidden everywhere once I knew what I was looking for. Smaller amounts moved between accounts. Cash withdrawals. Credit cards I didn't know existed. He had built an entire second relationship using money he convinced me we didn't have. I looked down at myself at one point and noticed the sleeve of my cardigan had started fraying near the wrist. I'd been meaning to replace it for months. But every time I almost bought a new one, I heard Nolan's voice in my head telling me we needed to be careful. Meanwhile, he was paying for another woman's apartment downtown. I think something inside me went numb after that. Not dramatic numbness. Just quiet. Cold. By the time Nolan got home that evening, I'd already stopped crying. That probably scared him more than anything else. Nolan walked through the front door around 6:30 carrying grocery bags from Trader Joe's. That alone almost made me laugh. He usually complained that Trader Joe's was overpriced. But suddenly there he was with fancy pasta sauce and flowers like we were the kind of couple who still did thoughtful little things for each other. I was sitting at the kitchen table pretending to scroll through emails on my phone. "Hey," he said carefully. I looked up. "Hey." For a second, everything felt disturbingly normal. The dog wandered over to him. Nolan bent down automatically to scratch behind her ears. He loosened his tie, set the grocery bags on the counter, started putting things away. 12 years of routine moving around the kitchen like muscle memory. And all I could think was, who are you when you leave this house? Not in a dramatic way either. I genuinely couldn't understand it. How do you sit across from someone every night while financing another relationship? How do you complain about interest rates while paying another woman's electric bill? I kept watching him move around the kitchen. He opened the fridge, frowned slightly. "We're out of creamer again? I guess. You didn't put it on the list?" There it was. That tiny irritation. That normal, everyday tone. And suddenly something about it exhausted me. Not anger exactly. Just this overwhelming clarity that I couldn't do this conversation anymore. Any of them. Nolan finally looked at me properly. "You okay?" "Yeah. You seem off." I nodded slowly. "How long have you been paying Leah's rent?" Everything stopped. Literally. His hand froze on the refrigerator door. I watched his entire body go still before he slowly turned around. "What?" I almost appreciated the instinct to pretend for one last second. I saw the apartment payments. His face lost color immediately. Not guilt at first. Fear. That's the part one remember clearly now. He looked scared before he looked sorry. "Nolan," I said quietly, "don't lie to me right now. I honestly can't handle it." The refrigerator door drifted shut beside him. For a few seconds, he just stared at me like he was trying to calculate how much damage had already been done. "What exactly did you see?" That question told me everything. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I can explain." What exactly did you see? I looked down at my hands because suddenly I felt embarrassed sitting there. Embarrassed for trusting him this completely. Enough. He pulled out the chair across from me slowly and sat down. And weirdly, he looked tired. Not emotional. Not devastated. Just tired in the way people look when they know a long-running lie has finally collapsed. It's not as bad as it looks, he said. I actually stared at him for a second because I couldn't believe that was his opening sentence. She has an apartment you've been paying for since 2023. She was in a bad situation. I laughed once under my breath. I couldn't help it. A bad situation? Tessa, please let me explain this before you jump to conclusions. Jump to conclusions. I remember thinking, you're still managing me. Even now. She's 29, I said quietly. You bought her furniture. His jaw tightened. It wasn't like that at first. There was something almost pathetic about the way he kept trying to shrink it down. Like if he used softer words, the reality would become smaller too. I leaned back in my chair. So, what was it at first? Silence. He rubbed his face hard with both hands before speaking again. I met her through work. Of course. We started talking during a rough period. What rough period? Another silence. And there it was again, that subtle shift where somehow our marriage problems were being positioned as context for his choices. We were disconnected for a while. I looked at him carefully. Because maybe we had been disconnected sometimes. Most long marriages go through stretches like that. But I never responded by secretly financing another man's life. You could have talked to me. I tried. No, you complained. That's different. That hit him harder than I expected. His expression changed slightly. Because Nolan did complain. Constantly, actually. About stress. Work. Pressure. Bills. Life. But real conversations? Honest ones? Vulnerable ones? Those almost never happened unless they benefited him somehow. She made me feel. He stopped himself. What? His eyes shifted away from mine. I don't know. Wanted. Admired. Important. He didn't say it, but I could hear it anyway. And honestly, that hurt in a way I wasn't prepared for. Because I had spent years trying to support this man emotionally while he slowly turned me into another responsibility on his list. Meanwhile, some other woman got the version of him who bought flowers and couches and probably smiled more. You told me we couldn't afford to replace the air conditioning. Tessa. No. Seriously. My voice stayed calm, which seemed to make him more nervous somehow. Last summer I slept downstairs for 2 weeks because the bedroom was too hot and you said we needed to be financially responsible. He closed his eyes briefly. And the whole time you were paying $3,200 a month for somebody else's apartment. I was going to end it. That sentence landed between us like something rehearsed. When? No answer. Last month. Silence. Last year. Still nothing. The truth was obvious. He hadn't planned to end anything. He planned to continue exactly like this for as long as possible. People always imagine affairs as passion or obsession or chaos. But sitting across from Nolan that night, it felt uglier than that. It felt selfish. Convenient. Like he genuinely believed he deserved 2 lives while I adjusted myself smaller and smaller to make room for his excuses. I never meant to hurt you, he said quietly. And weirdly enough, I believed him. Not because he was innocent. Because I honestly don't think he thought about me enough to fully imagine the damage. That realization was worse. I stood up from the table. Immediately his head lifted. Where are you going? I'm tired. Tessa, don't do this. Do what? Shut down. I almost smiled at that because it was incredible hearing him say that now after years of dismissing every emotional need I had. You've been emotionally checked out of this marriage for years, Nolan. That's not true. Really? My voice cracked a little then for the first time all night. You made me feel guilty for buying shampoo at Target. His face changed. And finally, he looked ashamed. Not because of Leah. Because suddenly he could see the math of it. The comparisons. The imbalance. I grabbed my phone from the table. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. Tessa, please. That word again. Please. He'd said it more in the last 10 minutes than he probably had in the previous 3 years. I stopped near the hallway without turning around. How long were you planning to keep lying to me? The silence behind me answered everything. That night, I barely slept. Around 1 in the morning, I heard Nolan walking around downstairs. Cabinet doors opening. Closing. The back door sliding open for a minute. I stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me, thinking about all the little ways my life had changed over the years without me noticing. I stopped buying nice skincare because it felt wasteful. Stopped suggesting trips. Stopped asking for date nights after he canceled enough of them. Stopped expecting much of anything really. I had adjusted myself around his version of our financial reality until I barely recognized who I used to be. And maybe the saddest part? If I hadn't accidentally seen those emails, I probably would have kept doing it for another 10 years. The next morning felt strangely polite. That's the best way I can describe it. Nolan made coffee before I came downstairs. He even toasted a bagel for me, which he hadn't done since maybe the first year of our marriage. The air in the kitchen felt stiff, like both of us were performing normalcy because neither one knew what the rules were anymore. "You didn't sleep much," he said carefully. "Neither did you," I thought. "You snore when you're stressed." He looked down at his coffee mug for a second. "I called her." I leaned against the counter silently. I ended it. There it was. The emergency cleanup phase. I wish people understood how insulting that part feels. Like the affair only becomes unacceptable once the wife finds out. Like suddenly deleting the relationship should earn points somehow. "When?" I asked. "Last night." I nodded once. He waited for a reaction that never came. And honestly, I think my calmness unsettled him more than screaming would have. Nolan understood arguments. He was good at them. Good at redirecting conversations until you forgot why you were upset in the first place. But there wasn't really anything left to debate now. I already knew. He sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "I know this looks terrible." I stared at him for a second. Looks terrible. Not as terrible. Looks terrible. "You paid another woman's rent for 3 years. She depended on me." The second he said it, I saw him realize how bad it sounded. I folded my arms slowly. "And what exactly did you think I was doing?" That hit him harder than yelling would have. Because the truth was, I depended on him too. We were married. We built a life together. Or at least I thought we had. But somewhere along the way, he started seeing my needs as burdens and hers as meaningful. That difference sat heavily between us. Nolan rubbed both hands over his face. I got in over my head. That was probably the first honest thing he'd said. Because affairs like this don't happen in one giant decision. They happen in layers. A lunch turns into regular texting. Texting turns into emotional dependence. Then suddenly you're furnishing someone else's apartment while your wife apologizes for wanting a weekend trip. I grabbed my keys from the counter. "Where are you going?" "Work." "Tessa, can we please talk tonight?" I paused for a second. "About what?" "How we fix this." I looked at him then. Really looked at him. The dark circles under his eyes. The panic sitting just underneath his voice. The way he suddenly seemed desperate to communicate after years of emotional distance. And maybe this sounds cruel, but part of me kept thinking, why no? Why is honesty only urgent when you're scared? "I don't know if this is fixable," I said quietly. His expression cracked a little at that. "Tessa, I mean it." For the first time since I found out, he looked genuinely shaken. Not defensive. Not calculating. Afraid. I left before he could say anything else. The drive to work felt surreal. Everyone around me was living normal Tuesday mornings while my entire marriage suddenly looked fake from the inside. At a red light, I caught myself remembering stupid little things. The year Nolan convinced me not to buy a new winter coat because we needed to stay disciplined. The anniversary dinner where he spent half the night talking about interest rates and retirement contributions. The Christmas he gave me slippers and said, "Practical gifts are smarter anyway." Meanwhile, he was paying for rooftop apartments and designer furniture somewhere across the city. I kept replaying that part because it made me feel stupid. Not poor. Not betrayed. Stupid. Like I'd been participating in a reality that only existed for me. At work, I made it through exactly 40 minutes before my coworker Dana cornered me near the supply room. "You look awful," she said bluntly. "Thank you." "No, seriously. Are you sick?" I almost said yes. Instead, I just stood there holding a box of patient files, feeling suddenly exhausted down to my bones. Dana's expression softened immediately. "Oh no. What happened?" And I don't know why, but hearing someone ask that gently almost broke me. "My husband's been having an affair," I whispered. Her eyes widened instantly. "Oh my God." "It gets worse." There was a long pause before I finally said it out loud. "He's been paying for her apartment for 3 years." Dana actually stopped moving. Like physically froze. "What?" I nodded once, staring at the floor. He told me we were struggling financially this whole time. The silence afterward felt heavy. Then she said something quietly that stayed with me for months afterward. Tessa, that's financial abuse. I immediately shook my head. No, it's not like. It kind of is. I opened my mouth to argue again, then stopped. Because honestly, I didn't fully know anymore. Would I have stayed in a smaller apartment if I knew the truth about our finances? No. Would I have spent years denying myself basic things if I knew he was secretly supporting someone else? Absolutely not. He controlled information, controlled guilt, controlled the narrative of our marriage so thoroughly that I stopped trusting my own instincts. That realization made me nauseous. Dana touched my arm carefully. What are you gonna do? And there was that question again. The one everybody eventually asks. The truth was, I still didn't know. Not because I wanted to stay. Because 12 years is a long time to emotionally untangle overnight. People online always talk like leaving should be immediate and obvious. But real life is messy. There's shock first. Routine. History. The weird muscle memory of loving someone. Even after betrayal, part of your brain still expects them to text you about groceries. That's the horrifying part. At lunch, Nolan called twice. I ignored both. Then he texted. Please don't shut me out. A minute later. I love you. I stared at the screen for a long time. Because maybe he did love me in whatever broken, selfish way he understood love. But love without honesty starts feeling a lot like control after a while. I didn't answer. That evening, I got home before he did. The house felt strangely unfamiliar. Same couch. Same photos on the wall. Same kitchen table where we'd spent years eating cheap takeout while discussing budgets. But now every object felt slightly contaminated by information I didn't have before. I walked upstairs into our bedroom and opened my closet. Most of my clothes suddenly looked tired. Not because we couldn't afford better. Because I believed we couldn't. That distinction mattered. I sat on the edge of the bed thinking about how many times Nolan watched me put things back on store shelves while secretly funding another woman's life. That level of deception requires practice. Planning. Compartmentalization. You don't accidentally maintain a second household for 3 years. Around 7:30, I heard the garage door open. My chest tightened automatically. Habit. Nolan came upstairs slower than usual. When he appeared in the doorway, he looked nervous to see me packing a small overnight bag. What's that? I'm staying with my sister for a few days. His entire face changed. Tessa, don't leave. I need space. We can work through this. The speed of that sentence irritated me more than I expected. Not because reconciliation was impossible. Because suddenly he was willing to fight for the marriage only after I discovered the truth. Where was this energy when I was lonely? When I kept asking why we never spent time together anymore. When our relationship slowly became about bills and logistics and guilt. I don't even know you are right now, I said honestly. That's not fair. I looked at him carefully. And there it was again. That instinct to reposition himself as wounded too. As if my reaction was now part of the problem. You lied to me every single day for 3 years. I made mistakes. Mistakes. Plural. Small word for sustained betrayal. I zipped the bag shut calmly. Nolan's voice dropped lower then, more emotional than I'd heard it in years. I'll do anything. And maybe he meant that. But standing there looking at him, I realized something painful. The version of Nolan willing to do anything only appeared when consequences finally reached him personally. After Nolan said, I'll do anything, neither of us spoke for a few seconds. The bedroom felt painfully quiet. I could hear the dryer running downstairs. A car passing outside. Small normal sounds that suddenly felt disconnected from the conversation happening in our house. I held onto the handle of my overnight bag and looked at him standing near the doorway. There was a time when seeing Nolan emotional would have shattered me immediately. And he did look emotional now. Not fake crying emotional. Not dramatic. Just scared. His voice sounded rough when he spoke again. Please don't leave like this. Like what? Like, this is already over. I stared at him for a second because I honestly didn't know how to answer that. Part of me was still in shock. Another part already felt strangely detached. Not healed. Not strong. Just tired in a deeper way than I knew how to explain. Tessa, he said quietly, I know I screwed up. The phrase irritated me instantly. Not because it was wrong. Because it sounded so small compared to what he'd actually done. Screwing up is forgetting an anniversary. Not maintaining another relationship for 3 years while convincing your wife you couldn't afford basic things. I looked around our bedroom slowly. The same bedroom where I'd spent years hearing about budgets and financial pressure. The same bedroom where Nolan would sit beside me at night scrolling through investment accounts while telling me we needed to stay disciplined. And the entire time, another woman was living in an apartment he paid for every month. I suddenly couldn't breathe properly in there anymore. I need space, I said quietly. You can have space here. No, Nolan. I can't. His face tightened immediately. Because he understood what leaving physically meant. This was becoming real now. Not just a bad conversation. Consequences. He stepped closer carefully like he was approaching something fragile. I love you. The words landed strangely flat between us. Not because I thought he was lying. Because love suddenly didn't feel as important as honesty anymore. I swallowed hard. You loved me while doing this. That made him stop moving. For the first time all night, he didn't seem to have a response ready. And honestly, that sentence hurt me too. Because I knew relationships were complicated. People were complicated. But there was something deeply painful about realizing someone could look you in the eye every day, kiss you goodbye every morning, sleep beside you every night, and still build another life behind your back. Nolan sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. I never wanted to hurt you. I almost said, then why didn't you stop? But I already knew the answer. Because he didn't think he'd get caught. That truth sat ugly and heavy inside my chest. I picked up my phone from the nightstand. There were old photos of us on the lock screen from years earlier. One from a camping trip before we got married. Another from our first apartment. We looked happy. Or maybe just younger. Maybe there's a difference. I'm staying with Ava for a few days, I said finally. Nolan rubbed his hand over his mouth slowly. For how long? I don't know. You're really leaving. It wasn't a question. I nodded once. And suddenly his voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard before. Tessa, please don't throw away 12 years over this. Over this. I closed my eyes briefly. Because somehow even now, he still talked about the affair like it was one terrible event instead of thousands of choices spread across years. You already threw it away, I said quietly. That one finally broke through. His entire expression collapsed for a second. Not anger. Not defensiveness. Just the realization that I meant it. I grabbed my bag before I could change my mind. Nolan followed me downstairs. Neither of us spoke while I put on my shoes near the front door. The silence felt awful. Not explosive. Worse. Familiar. Like all the conversations we should have had years ago but never did. Right before I opened the door, Nolan said quietly behind me. I ended it. I paused without turning around. When? Tonight. I almost laughed from exhaustion. Because of course he did. Now. After discovery. After 3 years. I don't know what you want me to say to that. I'm trying to fix this. I finally turned to look at him. And for a second, I saw flashes of the man I married underneath all the betrayal. The man who used to bring me coffee when I worked late. The man who held my hand at my mother's funeral. The man I thought I was building a life with. That was the hardest part. If he'd been cruel all the time, leaving would have been easier. But real betrayal rarely looks like movie villains. Sometimes it looks like someone who loves you in certain ways while failing you completely in others. I can't even process what's real right now, I admitted. His eyes filled immediately at that. And maybe he finally understood then that this wasn't just about cheating. He had damaged my sense of reality inside our marriage. I opened the front door before the conversation could keep circling. The night air outside felt heavy and warm. Nolan followed me onto the porch. Tessa. I stopped at my car. I know you hate me right now. The strange thing was, I didn't. Not yet. I was too shocked for hate. Too exhausted. Too emotionally numb. I don't know what I feel, I said honestly. That answer seemed to hurt him more than anger would have. Because anger still implies emotional attachment. But uncertainty? Distance? That terrified him. I got into the car without saying goodbye. And while driving to Ava's apartment, one thought kept repeating quietly in my head the entire time. He let me live smaller so someone else could live bigger. I woke up at Ava's place before the sun was fully up. For a second, I didn't remember where I was. Then everything came back in pieces. Nolan. The emails. The apartment payments. 3 years of lies sitting quietly behind every "we can't afford it" conversation I ever believed. My stomach tightened before I even opened my eyes properly. Ava's guest room was small, simple, familiar in a way that didn't require performance. For the first time in years, I hadn't woken up thinking about someone else's mood or schedule. Just silence. And my own thoughts. That almost felt worse. When I stepped into the kitchen, Ava was already awake, scrolling on her phone with a mug of coffee in her hand. She looked up immediately. "You didn't sleep again, did you?" I shook my head slightly. "No." She didn't comment. Just pushed a mug toward me. That was Ava. No drama. No pressure. Just quiet presence. My phone was on the counter. It had been lighting up all night. Nolan. Messages stacked on top of each other. I ended it. "I swear it's over. Please talk to me. I can fix this." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then locked it again without replying. Ava noticed. "You're still reading them?" "Not really reading," I said. "More like, checking." She nodded slowly like she understood exactly what I meant. "That habit. That pull. Even after everything. You don't owe him immediate access to you," she said. I didn't respond right away. Because logically, I knew she was right. Emotionally, my brain still hadn't caught up. Ava leaned back in her chair. "He showed up here again?" "Yes." "And?" I exhaled slowly. "He says it's over with her." "Completely." Ava didn't even hesitate. "Of course he does." Not anger. Not shock. Just tired certainty. That was what made it sink deeper. Because even someone outside the marriage could see the pattern instantly. I looked down at my coffee. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to feel right now." Ava's voice softened slightly. "You're not supposed to feel anything specific." That stayed with me longer than expected. Because I had spent years feeling the wrong things in that marriage. Guilt for wanting more. Guilt for asking questions. Guilt for spending money. Guilt for existing in ways that made him uncomfortable. Now there was no instruction manual for this part. Later that morning, I still went to work. Not because things were normal, but because I didn't know what else to do with myself. Ava offered to come with me or stay home with me, but I said no. I needed movement. Something predictable. The drive felt strange. The city looked the same as always. Traffic. Horns. People grabbing coffee. But my internal world was completely disconnected from it. At work, I barely made it through the first hour before my coworker Dana noticed something was wrong. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," she said. "I haven't." That made her pause. I didn't plan to say anything. It just came out. My husband was having an affair. Dana froze. Not in gossip excitement. In real shock. "Oh my God." I nodded once. Then added, almost flatly, "For 3 years." Her expression changed immediately. "And you just found out?" "Yes." There was a pause. "What are you going to do?" That question again. Everyone kept asking it like I should already have an answer. But my life had just been rewritten. I was still trying to understand the new version. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. Dana nodded slowly. Then, carefully. "Does he know you left?" "Yes." "And?" I hesitated. "He keeps saying he ended it." Dana exhaled sharply. "After you found out." I didn't answer. Because I didn't need to. She already understood. That part of the truth didn't require explanation anymore. By lunchtime, my phone had dozens of missed messages again. Nolan wasn't stopping. Not yet. And somewhere deep down, I realized something uncomfortable. He wasn't trying to lose me. He was trying to reset everything back to the moment before I knew. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. By the time I left work that evening, I wasn't even looking at my phone anymore. Not because I was being strong. Because I was mentally full. Like there was no more space left to process new messages from Nolan. Ava texted me once during the day. "You okay coming back here tonight?" I replied, yes. That was it. Simple. Functional. No explanation needed. When I got back to her apartment, she was in the kitchen again, cooking something that smelled like garlic and onions. She looked over her shoulder when I walked in. "He contact you?" "Yeah. A lot." Ava nodded like she already expected that. She didn't ask for details this time. Instead, she just said, "Eat first." And somehow that felt more important than any conversation about my marriage. We ate in silence for a while. Not awkward silence. Just shared space. The kind you don't get when your entire life has been built around managing someone else's reactions. At one point, I noticed my hands shaking slightly while holding the spoon. Ava saw it too but didn't comment. She just slid a glass of water closer to me. After a while, I finally said it out loud. He keeps saying he ended it like that fixes anything. Ava didn't even look surprised. It doesn't. I nodded slowly. But he says it like it should matter. Ava leaned back in her chair. People only act fast when they think they can stop consequences, not when they care about impact. That sentence hit harder than I expected. Because it explained something I hadn't been able to name. Nolan wasn't processing loss. He was processing exposure. My phone buzzed again. I didn't pick it up immediately. Ava noticed. You don't have to check it every time it rings. I know. But you are. I hesitated. Then finally looked. Nolan. I'm outside your sister's building. Please just talk to me for 5 minutes. My stomach tightened immediately. I looked up at Ava. Her expression changed instantly. He's here. Yeah. She stood up immediately. No. That one word. Clean. Direct. No. I stood there for a second just staring at the message. Part of me felt that old reflex. Go down. Explain. Keep things calm. That habit again. Years of managing his emotions instead of my own. Ava grabbed her keys. You are not going down there alone. We both went to the window. And there he was. Nolan. Standing near the entrance of the building. Hands in his pockets. Looking up occasionally like he wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing anymore. Seeing him there didn't feel like a dramatic movie moment. It felt uncomfortable. Real. Like someone invading a space they no longer belonged in. Ava exhaled sharply. He's desperate. I didn't answer right away. Because that word didn't fully fit. Desperate made it sound emotional. What I saw felt more like control slipping. Like he couldn't tolerate not being able to reach me. My phone buzzed again. I just want to explain properly. I don't want you to think I'm a bad person. I stared at that sentence for a long moment. Then something inside me shifted. Slowly. Not anger. Clarity. I said quietly, he's not trying to explain. He's trying to manage how I see him. Ava looked at me. That's exactly what it is. We stood there for a moment watching him through the window. Then I made a decision I didn't fully think through. I texted him. Go home. I'm not coming down. Almost immediately. Please. Just 5 minutes. I didn't respond. Another message. I ended it for real. I chose you. That line. Chose you. Something about it finally landed differently. Because it reframed everything incorrectly. As if the affair was a choice between two people. When in reality, I was never part of that decision at all. Ava touched my arm lightly. You don't have to perform closure for him. That word. Perform. It stayed with me. I didn't go downstairs. After a few minutes, Nolan finally left. Not dramatically. No big scene. Just walking away slowly like he wasn't sure what else he could do. And weirdly, that was the moment something inside me loosened a little. That night, I lay in Ava's guest room again. My phone stayed silent for the first time in days. No messages. No apologies. No explanations. Just quiet. And in that quiet, I realized something uncomfortable but calm. For the first time since finding out, I wasn't reacting to Nolan anymore. I was just observing him from a distance. And that distance felt like the first real boundary I had ever set in my marriage without even meaning to. I didn't respond to Nolan for 3 days. Not once. That silence did something to him I didn't fully understand at first. Because Nolan wasn't used to silence. He was used to managing reactions. If I was upset, he could calm it. If I was emotional, he could redirect it. If I was confused, he could explain it. But silence? Silence meant he had no access point. And that started showing. It began with messages that changed tone. At first, still controlled. I just want to talk. Then shorter. Please respond. Then, fragmented. You're making a mistake. I didn't think you'd go this far. That last one stuck with me. Not because it was true. Because it revealed something important. He still thought I was reacting to him. Like my choices were still orbiting his behavior. I wasn't. Not anymore. Ava noticed it before I said anything. He's escalating, she said one evening while looking at my phone screen. I nodded. He's losing control. That was the real shift. Not emotional heartbreak. Control loss. Because when people like Nolan lose narrative control, they don't stop. They reframe. And that's exactly what he started doing. I found out 2 days later from a coworker. Not directly. Indirectly. Dana came over looking uneasy. Hey, I don't know if I should tell you this. My stomach tightened immediately. What? She lowered her voice. Someone from your husband's side contacted HR again. I froze. He said you've been emotionally unstable for months and that this separation is affecting your work performance. I just stared at her. Not shocked. Just watching the pattern complete itself. He wasn't trying to win me back anymore. He was trying to pre-build a story where I looked like the problem. Dana hesitated. But HR already said they won't engage. I nodded slowly. Because that part mattered. He was trying to shift the narrative. But he was too late. Too late in a system that now required evidence, not just voice. That night, I did something I hadn't done before. I documented everything. Messages. Emails. Financial records I still had access to. Patterns. Not out of emotion. Out of clarity. Ava watched me from the couch. You're building something, she said. I didn't look up. I'm just making sure reality is visible. She didn't ask anything else. Because she understood now. This wasn't heartbreak recovery anymore. This was control correction. The real breaking point came a week later. Nolan showed up at my workplace again. But this time, something was different. He wasn't alone. 2 of our mutual friends were with him. That told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't trying to talk to me privately anymore. He was trying to influence perception. He saw me and immediately stepped forward. Tessa, please just listen. I stopped walking. Didn't approach. Didn't retreat. Just stayed still. And that already unsettled him. Because I wasn't reacting anymore. I know this looks bad, he said quickly. I nodded once. It is bad. That pause made him hesitate. He wasn't used to agreement without emotion. One of the friends shifted uncomfortably. Nolan continued. She's been shutting me out completely. I've been trying to fix things. That sentence. Fix things. Always the same framing. I looked at him for a second. Then said calmly. You didn't try to fix it when I was asking for time, attention, or honesty. Silence. Small shift. People around us started listening now. Not loudly. Just paying attention. Because the tone didn't match his story. I continued. You only started trying when you lost control of access to me. That landed. Not dramatically. Just clearly. One of the friends looked down immediately. Nolan's jaw tightened. Tessa, don't do this here. I almost smiled. Because that used to work. Not anymore. You brought it here, I said quietly. That was the moment something changed in the air. Because people weren't seeing a dramatic breakup anymore. They were seeing mismatch. 2 versions of the same story not aligning. Nolan realized it too. His voice dropped. You're trying to destroy me. That was the first emotional accusation. And it told me he was losing the rational frame completely. I shook my head slightly. No. I looked at him properly. You did that when you built a second life and called it financial responsibility. Silence again. Longer this time. The friends didn't step in. Because there was nothing to defend anymore that sounded stable. Nolan exhaled sharply. You're not the same person. That almost made me laugh. Because that was finally true. No, I said simply. I'm not. Then I walked past him. No argument left. No emotional opening. Just closure in motion. And I felt it then. Not revenge like movies. Not satisfaction. Something quieter. Finality of narrative control breaking. It collapsed. Slowly. Quietly. But visibly. I didn't have to tell people anything more. The pattern did it for me. Once questions start forming in people's minds, they don't stop at the version that sounds convenient. One of Nolan's friends stopped replying to him completely. Then another. Then I heard through Ava that he had started avoiding social events altogether. Not because I ruined anything, but because the explanation he built no longer held weight outside his control. Meanwhile, I moved. Slowly. Carefully. Not dramatically rebuilding a life. Just reclaiming one. A new apartment. Smaller. Mine. No shared accounts. No unclear financial narratives. No invisible decisions happening without my knowledge. One evening, I ran into someone from Nolan's work circle at a grocery store. They hesitated before speaking, then said something I didn't expect. Honestly, none of us knew it was like that. I just nodded. Because that was the truth. They didn't. Because he controlled the version of himself people saw. Until he didn't. And that loss of control did more damage than any confrontation ever could. That night, I got one final message from Nolan. Not angry. Not manipulative. Just empty. I understand now. I really do. I lost you. I stared at it for a long time. Then I didn't reply. Because there was nothing left to correct. No version of me left inside that story. I put my phone down and sat quietly in my new living room. No noise. No emotional chaos. Just stillness. And for the first time since everything started, that stillness didn't feel like loss. It felt like ownership. Not revenge in the loud sense, but in the final sense. He didn't lose me in one moment. He lost the ability to define me at all.